Hello, medium fans! Welcome to another Eternal Deck Tech. As you may or may not know, we just had a brand new pseudo-campaign. I guess a bunch of cards dropped. Trials of Grodov? Grodov? Something like that. Good old fantasy names. So, what we have is we've got 20 new cards that got added to Eternal. A bunch of, like, kind of narrow archetypes have been lifted up by a bunch of different cards that are attempting to make them from like tier 3 decks to maybe like tier 2 or tier 1.5. And let me tell ya, I'm going to take what everybody thinks is the worst of them apparently, and I'm going to play a deck. I've got a pretty good idea for one, I think, here. So we're going to be doing some shifty things. What we have is a frozen game and this deck. So the idea of the deck is, well, as it says, to use a lot of shift. So we're going to be playing, basically all of our units have shift, or at least enable shift, and then the idea is to be exceptionally aggressive about it. So there's a few key cards in here that I'm going to go over, but like, really, I think the ones that actually enable this to be powerful are things like Waystone Elemental, and I actually have really liked Cloak of Moments. Cloak of Moments has been great. So, this is one of the new cards, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we have Ghar, Master Sandmage, because, as you might notice, we don't have any flyers. So, to cover up that a little bit, we're going to be running Ghar, and so whenever an enemy unit with flying is played, you can silence it. And the shift is actually really good sometimes. I've had a few times where I've had somebody with like 4 or 5 cards in hand, you shift this for 5, and they just scoop them up because things like Ikaria or Mokto or just a bunch of different things get so much worse, like Vara. Just suddenly it's just a 3/3 with no text. Suddenly becomes pretty medium or even irrelevant once you shift it for 5. Not saying that that always comes up, because by the time that you're shifting it for 5, they might not have many cards in hand. But if they're a slower deck, that can be really punishing. So we've got Ghar, Master Sandmage, and that's why we've only got 2 copies of it, because we don't need too many. It's really to stop the flyers. It's a nice early aggressive unit, which we'd like. This is a very aggressive deck. But it's also a little bit narrow, so we've got just a couple of them. Then we have Stonehewer, which I've liked a lot. When it emerges, we get +2 power that turn, and that'll allow us to get up to the 5 that we need for Waystone Elemental, or for, like, Combustion, Brawler, and things like that a little bit easier. Lets us lay a bunch of things down at the same time. So Stonehewer has been very good. I've been impressed with it quite a bit. We have one of the new cards, which is Borderlands Trailcutter. When one of our units becomes shifted, it emerges 1 turn sooner. This one's also pretty big, as you can imagine, because that means that all of our aggression just comes out quite a bit quicker. And people haven't been super fast to kill it, which is nice. Also, we can just pay 5 and draw a card, and if it has shift, then we get to shift it immediately. So we don't have to worry about paying the shift as well. Not super relevant, because we are more of an aggressive deck. We're not generally doing a bunch of, like, late game try and get value off of the shift and get card advantage. But if we're in a position where our opponent's starting to stabilize and we're going to a little bit of a longer game, that can be really big. And so then we have Annex Smuggler, just a really nice aggressive smuggler, and we'll get into the market in a minute. We have Kimi, because Kimi is disgusting. If you can manage to actually get Kimi attacking, then it's very good. I will admit, I mean, we don't have any fight cards or anything like that, so getting Kimi in is not always going to be the easiest thing in the world. But it's still, I think, worthwhile to run, because if you've got like 2 or 3 things shifted, you play Kimi and start attacking with it, giving +1 to 3 units, and then getting another one, and then the next turn giving it to 3 again, one of them emerges, and doing that over and over and over is really, really hard to beat. Like, an unanswered Kimi is one of those things that snowballs out of control exceptionally quickly. They have to have like a harsh rule to kill it after you've swung once or twice with it. Anyways, then we have Nimble Conscript, another really fast early unit. We're going to be wanting to shift that for 1 a lot, because otherwise it's pretty medium, but I like it as just a very, very aggressive kind of card. Same with Mining Team. We're just going to be shifting all of these. As you can tell, this deck plays really low to the ground. So you're looking at it and you go like, oh, well, there's like 6 1-drops and 1 2-drop. No, 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 no. There's actually like 10 1-drops and 8 2-drops. So it's actually like a lot lower to the ground than it looks. This is our 4-drop. We have Combustion Brawler. The enemy player can't gain life. This is one of the really big shift units for us. This one's super important. Exhausting an enemy unit when it shifts is big. Combustion Brawler is definitely one of the best shifts around, so I've really liked that one for 4. It's pretty great. And then Waystone Elemental. And this one's a linchpin in many ways. So it costs 1 less for each of our shifted units, and then when it entombs, then we get 2 shifted units that are 2/3. And that just makes things really awkward. So the idea is that like on turn 1, you might be able to Auralian Infestation, get 2 shifted units, play on turn 2, like Mining Team shifted off the top of your deck or something if you're really lucky, and then turn 3, you have a 4/6 that if they kill it, becomes worse for them. So right away, that's a lot of pressure. Like that is a lot of pressure if you can curve out like that. And that's not unreasonable at all. So you can definitely get some really sick early draws. I mean, you don't have to have Auralian Infestation. You can just like turn 1, go slam down a Nimble Conscript. Turn 2, go like another Nimble Conscript again. Like you can do a couple more Nimble Conscripts. You can get it out early a few different ways. So it's just really nice to get there. Auralian Infestation is probably the best enabler of it, but you can get a couple of Nimble Conscripts instead. Stonehewer can help power it out, like I said, getting that extra emerge. But yeah, it's pretty gross. Then we have Cloak of Moments, which we talked about earlier as being, I thought it was really impressive. It makes everything cost 1 less to shift, but then also when one of our units emerge, they get +1/+1. And that's actually been really nice. So it's like a very, very cheap early Xenan Obelisk that makes everything cheaper. Don't get me wrong, I mean, Obelisk is still more powerful because once you get up to 8, +2/+2 is huge. +1/+1's not as big, and of course, this one doesn't give 1/1 to everything, but it's been surprisingly strong. If you can get this down really early, I've very much enjoyed it. I mean, if you can imagine a curve out where you go Cloak of Moments into Auralian Infestation, and suddenly you have 4 power worth of deadly scorpions on the board right away, that's pretty solid. Especially when you combine it with like Trailcutter and you're emerging them earlier. It gets pretty aggressive. Then we have our removal. We've got torches and tantrums, and that's really kind of self-explanatory. We just need some ways to kill things. We have Shugo standard in our power base so that we can get a little bit of extra damage in. Really nice aggressive card. We don't actually have, as you might notice, we don't have a lot of crests. We don't want depleted power because we're just so aggressive. Having depleted power when we're trying to do really tight curve outs like we were talking about, like Infestation into Stonehewer into Waystone Elemental. If you have Crest of Impulse in there, that throws that whole thing out of whack and suddenly you're a turn behind. You don't want to do that. So I did put a couple in because I like the Scout, but I didn't want to have too many. We don't have a lot of power because our deck is exceptionally low to the ground, so we're not trying to play a ton, and that's why we have the Shugo standards as well. And then in our market, we have Flame Blast as just a nice way to close out a game, so if we can get our opponent pretty low, but we're not quite at that point where we can kill them and they're stabilizing, Flame Blast going to the face is a great way to end a game. Potion of Alacrity I thought I would try just because it seems really fun and maybe interesting, like suddenly just pulling everything out a turn earlier and having a bunch of unblockable units can be really good situationally, and I thought that might be worth testing. We've got Stronghold Vandal to kill enemy attachments, so a nice little way to get both relic hate or attachment hate and also have another unit that shifts. We've got Purify as extra removal, and then Xenan Obelisk, so if the games go a little bit late and we want some extra oomph, we can make a bunch of big units with an Obelisk. And that's the deck. I'm going to try it out here, and I've had a lot of luck with it so far. So we're going to be jamming some games with it, and I'll see you soon.